Hi, this is Sausan of the Sausan Academy of Egyptian Dance, and this is a very, very brief history of belly dance, also known as Raqs Sharqi, or Dance of the East, also known as Oriental Dance, which is also known as Danse de ventre or Baladi dance. When I was around 10 years old, I went through my father's LP collection and I found these two LPs. I was very intrigued by these front covers and I knew that they were some sort of exotic Middle Eastern or belly dancers. These two dancers were named Najla Ates and Babuka Papas, both from Turkey. You can find their performances today on YouTube. And that was what got me started on my road to discovering the dance that I do today, that we call belly dance. Our first known report of Middle Eastern dancers comes from English author Gustave Flaubert, who traveled to Egypt in 1849. During his travels, he writes in his journal about his sexual prowess and describes his encounters with two dancers, Safiya and Kuchuk Hanum, both from Esna, Egypt. In fact, both can even be the same dancer. A likeness of her may even be depicted here leaning against the wall in this painting. According to Flaubert, Kuchuk Hanum, which means little lady, would dance for him like a little bee while taking her clothes off. We don't really know if she actually took her clothes off, but the reference to dancing like a bee closely resembles the chemise movement, which is part of the dance. When Flaubert returned to England in 1850, he wrote stories based on his experience in the Middle East, and from these writings we get the idea of Orientalism, a concept derived from the West that would define the, quote, West's historically patronizing representation of the East, the societies and peoples who inhabit the places of Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. Evidence of this is found on the covers of some of his books seen here, as well as others written by successive writers. So, from the late 1800s, we see artists of the same time painting their view of the Middle East as seen through their eyes and mindset. Here are some of the paintings and the names of the artists. We also see photography that was made into postcards showing native women with bare breasts. These women are posing bare-breasted because, for their consent to be photographed in this way, they would receive some sort of compensation, usually in the form of money. This compensation was eagerly accepted as it would go a long way in their survival. And so continued the concept of Orientalism and the exotic Middle East. In 1893, Sol Bloom, an Orthodox Jew-American politician from New York, who began his career in entertainment and music in Chicago, established the midway of the Chicago World's Fair and called it the Streets of Cairo. Three women, namely Fatima Jamila, Farida Masar Spiropoulos, and Aishia Wahbi, would come to be known as the Little Egypt Dancer and would perform the, quote, Hoochie Coochie dance for fair goers. A well-known song written by this 23-year-old Sol Bloom that came from the event is called The Streets of Cairo. Many of us know this little tune. Consequently, a vision of submissive seductresses dressed in conceptualized ancient Egyptian clothing became mainstream, perpetuating the idea of Orientalism through the performances of performers and actresses that were featured primarily, but not always, in Hollywood movies. While the West fed on these misrepresentations of the Middle East, Egypt and its culture and way of life portrayed an altogether different reality. From 1828 to 1908, the Ottoman Empire saw decline. From 1908 to 1922, the Ottoman Empire was defeated. During this time, from 1805 to 1848, Muhammad Ali Pasha al-Masud ibn Agha, also known as just Muhammad Ali of Egypt and the Sudan, rose to power as the Ottoman governor of Egypt. While in power, in 1833, he banned all dancers from Egypt. There were two groups of dancers, namely the Awalim and the Gawazi. The Awalim were scholarly women who wrote poetry, sang songs, composed music, and improvised lyrics for ballads, also called mawad, and most likely came from the harems of the now-defeated Ottoman Empire. They were very highly valued, and they were a celebrity-like group who performed for smaller harems for women only. Men were able only to hear them sing. The Gawazi were unveiled dancers who danced in public, usually in coffee shops and feasts called mulid. They were described by travelers as gypsies or gypsy-like wanderers and also worked as sex workers. Their daughters were reportedly sold to the highest bidder. There is a lot of gray area here, as well as some overlapping of the backgrounds and behaviors of the Awalim and the Gawazi. Much research has been done, and although Egyptians and Arabs in general celebrate life through dance, food, and art, we in the West are able to share in this dance through the dances of these women, who were then emulated by those that saw an opportunity to make their living by bringing it to the stage and therefore the forefront of the West by exploiting it through British occupation. Today, the most famous of the Gawazi dancers are the Banat Mazin, or the Mazin daughters, and are featured on several Egyptian films. Out of the three, Batiya, Khairiya, and Feryal, only Khairiya dances today in Egypt. During the English occupation of Egypt from 1882 to 1956, with the Brits' puritanical attitude of the time toward what was considered outlandish bodily expression by the Egyptian dancers, yet took advantage of patronizing the many local nightclubs, two dancers, each with her own interesting and amazing biography, rose to prominence. These two dancers were called Shafika al-Qibtiyya, or Shafika the Copt, and Badia al-Masabni, known as the mother of Oriental dance. Shafika al-Qibtiyya was a student of Shuk, the first Oriental dancer in Egypt. Shafika, already famous in the 1920s, was said to have been first to do the candelabra dance. She later became addicted to cocaine and died destitute in 1926. Badia Masabni is remembered for discovering the many dancers as well as musicians we see on Egyptian film, who got their start at her famous casino Badia, then located on Ahmad al-Din Street in Cairo, where many of these dancers and musicians were featured, and who later made names for themselves, branching out with their own dance and musical careers. Both women marked the pre-classic dance era, which begins in 1849 with Küçük Hanım. Additionally, both women who owned nightclubs, which were patronized by British soldiers, added to the evolution of the dance with innovative music and costuming. These two women would open doors to the many dancers and musicians we would see in their nightclubs, as well as in Egyptian film. From the nightclubs of Badia al-Masabni came three prominent dancers, namely Tahia Carioca, Samia Gamal, and Naima Akef, and would mark the classic period from 1930 to 1959. Originally named Badia Mohammed Karim el-Nidani, Tahia Carioca was given her name because of her love for the Carioca dance, which she infused into her own dance. Known as the Queen of Oriental Dance, Tahia is remembered for elevating the dance to the level we enjoy today and for being the first dancer to appear on a regular basis on Egyptian film, thus opening the doors to other aspiring dancers and making it possible for them to enjoy the same success she attained as a movie actress and star, as well as a highly respected and sought-after dancer. Samia Gamal, who is known as the national dancer of Egypt and whose real name is Zainab Khalil Ibrahim Mahfouz, was a protege of Tahia Carioca. She would be remembered for bringing flair and energy to the dance by establishing and setting a trend for fashion design in her dance, performing in costumes unlike the ones that were traditionally worn at the time, as well as being the first to dance with high heels during her performances and setting yet another trend for footwear outside the traditional slippers or bare feet. Naima Akef, known as a premier star of the Egyptian musical cinema, was from a circus family. She is remembered for the grace and beauty she presented in her innovative performances coupled with her angelic voice that, influenced by her circus upbringing, provided a strong foundation for her unique theatrical and sometimes balletic dance choreography, thereby introducing yet other elements of the performance to the dance stage, including the elements of ballet and theatrical choreography, an entirely new concept for her time. From 1961 to 1972, a new and exciting group exploded onto the scene in Egypt. Known as the Reda Dance Troupe, Mahmoud Reda recruited dancers and formed a dance troupe with Farida Fahmy as his lead dancer. This dance troupe would represent the dance in the highest level and would entertain natives and tourists alike at five-star hotels as well as in Egyptian film. Mahmoud Reda, a skilled technical dancer with Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly as his idols, trained his dancers in ballet technique in order to provide cohesiveness to the group and to his choreographies. While he was instrumental in bringing the dance to a global plane, it is said that he took the soul and therefore the juice out of the dance when he introduced ballet technique to his repertoire. From 1960 to 1989, during the time the Reda Dance Troupe was in its heyday, 3 prominent dancers rose to fame. This would mark the post-classic period. First, during this period to come onto the scene was Awatif Muhammad, who is known by her dance name Nagwa Fuad. Known as the Princess of Cairo, Nagwa Fuad is remembered for her enthusiastic and dynamic performances, her sensual nature, and her melodic voice, as well as numerous performance videos in which she danced and which she produced in the 1980s and the 1990s, along with her many performances in Egyptian films. Suhair Abdullah Zaki, or just Suhair Zaki, began to make a name for herself next and is remembered for her sweet, girl-next-door demeanor and infectious smile, which saw her dancing for the late Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and the late United States President Richard Nixon, who nicknamed her Zagharit. She has also received accolades and medals from the Shah of Iran, President of Tunisia, and the late Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser for her help in the war effort. She is known as the Kulthum of dance for being the first to dance to the music of this highly celebrated Egyptian singer. Atiyat Abdul Fattah Ibrahim, or Fifi Abdo, is known as the Queen of Shimmy. With only a 5th grade education, Fifi Abdo commands full orchestras of university-trained musicians and is seen at big events attended by the most well-known in the Egyptian film industry and 5-star hotels. These 3 dancers, although still alive, have given way to the now up-and-coming dancers of Egypt. During this time, when dancers were enjoying fame and fortune in Egypt, 3 prominent dancers began teaching belly dance in Northern California. These were Maganya Baptiste, Jamila Salimpour, and Jodette Silhi Johnson. Maganya Baptiste was the wife of a former Mr. America named Walter Baptiste. Establishing a yoga center on Arguello Street in San Francisco, Maganya Baptiste taught belly dance with elements of yoga and flourished as a center of yoga and belly dance until her death in 2016. Jamila Salimpour, a former circus performer, is said to have put belly dance on the map with her many classes during the 1960s through the 1980s in San Francisco and for presenting her group Balanat at the Renaissance pleasure fairs. She is also credited with codifying the dance as well as producing an offshoot of the dance which is now called American Tribal Style. She passed away in 2017 and is survived by her daughter Suhaila Salimpour, who has taken over her reins and teaches belly dance all over the world. Jodette Silhi Johnson, my amazing and wonderful teacher, began teaching belly dance in 1965 at the University of Davis, California. Prior to coming to America, she was working in Beirut and met Prince Mubarak of Kuwait and fell in love with him. But that was not to be. She discovered that her life was in danger as a result of this budding relationship, which required an end by certain factions. Soon after, she met her late husband while in Beirut and was offered safety in the United States as his wife. It is because of Jodette, where I began my studies in 1974 in Sacramento, that I continue to teach belly dancing in San Francisco today. Jodette lives in Sacramento and I visit her regularly. The timeline presented today, up until Fifi Abdo, is known as the Golden Age of Egypt. The arts, culture, and music flourished during that time. It would change as dancers began to be looked upon as solicitous and immoral, with the Egyptian film industry depicting them largely as low class. From 1990 to 1999, we see a shift in dance performance by Egyptian dancers with more ballet technique. Imad Saeed Mohammed Abdel Wahab, nicknamed Lucy, is known for her appearance in 1993 in a National Geographic special entitled Cairo Unveiled, directed by Kirk Simon and Karen Goodman. Dina Talat Saeed Mohammed, or just Dina, is known for her tiny costumes bearing much and has changed the style of dance greatly. At the turn of the century, a more modern era of dance emerged with Randa Kamel at the very top. She is known as the powerful dancer and commands top pay today in Egypt at five-star hotels and official private events. Today, dancers from all over the world, and especially from Russia, make their way to Egypt and are performing as dancers in hotels, Nile barges, and other venues. Because of the many fusion factors, belly dance, as I was taught it and know it, is fast disappearing. It is evolving in Egypt as it is evolving in the West as the new dance styles listed here. This is a very, very brief history of belly dance, primarily in Egypt. However, the following United States dancers are recognized as having contributed greatly to the study, enrichment, and contribution in belly dance here in the United States during the 1980s and before. This list may be incomplete. Please contact me with any name you believe needs to be added. Listed here are my works cited. That concludes my presentation on the very, very brief history of belly dance. My sincerest thanks go to Linda Grondel and to Mishmish for all of their help in making this little video a reality. This has been a very brief history of belly dance. So much more can be presented about it. It is steeped in history, politics, performance, culture, and tradition. First brought to the United States via the Middle Eastern nightclub circuit in the 1950s and 1960s, it has grown in popularity worldwide as a dance expression for both men and women. An entire industry was born out of this dance with famous costume designers, worldwide competitions, festivals, travel opportunities, and celebrity, and has opened new doors to fame to Egyptian dancers who would otherwise don their veil after a career of dance and disappear into obscurity. I am so very fortunate to have been a part of its beginnings. Support the belly dance arts at your local Middle Eastern venue. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to present to you my passion and my life and my livelihood, belly dance, and all that goes with it. Shukran and ma'salam.
برافو كويس قوي.